AITA for not helping pay my friend's $5,600 birthday dinner bill. She's used to eating at other people's expense. I went to Paisley's birthday dinner with my boyfriend, my friend Daniela, and her boyfriend. The dinner was at this fancy restaurant, the kind of place where the lighting is dim, the chairs are heavy, and the wine glasses are too delicate to hold comfortably. It was a group of about 17 people total, a big gathering, and I already knew going in that the bill situation might be a problem. Last year, something had happened at Paisley's birthday dinner that left a bad taste in my boyfriend's mouth, and he was adamant that we would not be part of a shared bill situation this time. I wasn't at her birthday dinner last year, but Daniela was, and she had told me about it. Apparently, at that dinner, one of Paisley's friends put the entire bill on her card under the assumption that everyone would Cash App or Venmo her their share. But not everyone did. By the end of the night, she was stuck with an $800 shortfall, which led to drama and lingering resentment. My boyfriend had heard about this mess and decided that he wanted nothing to do with a repeat of that situation. Knowing this, I called the restaurant beforehand to check their payment policies. They told me that while they could not split the bill at the end of the night, meaning one person would have to pay in full either in cash or on a single card, they could set up separate tabs for guests from the beginning. This meant that my little group of 4 could have our own tab while the rest of the party handled theirs. That seemed like the perfect solution, so when we arrived at the restaurant, we made sure to set that up immediately. Dinner itself was nice, at least at first. The restaurant had a lively atmosphere, and everyone seemed to be in good spirits, chatting, laughing, and drinking. The kind of place where you can tell everyone is trying just a little bit harder than usual, wearing their best outfits, checking their posture, holding their glasses with an air of sophistication. Since it was a birthday dinner, people were ordering freely, indulging a little. Cocktails, appetizers, entrees, desserts. No one was paying much attention to prices, at least not openly. At some point during the meal, Paisley offered me some caviar. She knew I had never tried it before, and she was excited for me to experience it. I hesitated for a second, I wasn't sure if I'd even like it, but I didn't want to be rude, so I took a cracker, spread with whatever fancy caviar she had ordered, and ate it. It was salty, briny, kind of an acquired taste, but not bad. I thanked her, and the dinner carried on. Because we had a separate tab, we were able to settle our bill early. Between the 4 of us, me, my boyfriend, Daniela, and her boyfriend, our total came out to about $650 before tip. Pricey, but we had planned for it, so we paid and then just sat, finishing our drinks and making small talk while the rest of the table continued their meal. About 30 minutes later, the bill for the rest of the party came out, and that's when things took a turn. Almost immediately, the mood shifted. I could sense the tension at the other end of the table as people started looking at the bill, doing quick mental math, pulling out their phones. There was a lot of hushed murmuring, people subtly glancing at each other, likely calculating their shares. The same thing that had happened last year was happening again. Some people had ordered lavishly, expecting the cost to be split evenly, while others were now realizing they'd be stuck covering more than they intended. Since our bill had already been paid, we decided it was a good time to head out. It was getting late, and we didn't want to linger while the bill drama unfolded. But as we got up to leave, Paisley's demeanor changed completely. She wasn't just irritated, she was mad. She said it was rude that we had a separate bill, that it wasn't proper restaurant etiquette, that we should have just done what everyone else did and paid together. She was clearly taking it as a personal slight, like we had insulted her or deliberately excluded ourselves from the group. And then she brought up the caviar. She said that since I had eaten a cracker with her caviar, should contribute to their bill. She made it seem like I had taken something expensive from her and left her to foot the cost. I was taken aback. I had eaten 1 cracker with caviar. I had not even thought about it in terms of money, it was a tiny bite, a kind gesture from her. But now she was framing it as if I had benefited from her generosity and then abandoned her with the cost. I didn't want to argue. I pulled out a $50 bill and handed it to her. In my mind, $50 was more than fair for a single bite of caviar. Honestly, it was probably too much, but I didn't want to create a scene, and I just wanted to leave. We said our goodbyes and left the restaurant, thinking that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Later, Paisley made it clear that she was still upset. She felt that I should have contributed more to their bill. She said the $50 wasn't enough and that I owed her more money. She also said that we should apologize, for what, I wasn't even entirely sure. For having a separate tab. For leaving before the bill drama escalated. For eating the caviar she willingly offered me. I genuinely don't know what to think. I'm open to admitting I was wrong if I actually was wrong, but I can't shake the feeling that this whole thing is ridiculous. I had one bite of caviar. There's no way that's worth more than $50, right? Am I missing something here? Update 1. I couldn't stop thinking about the dinner. No matter how much I tried to push it out of my mind, it lingered, gnawing at me. It wasn't just the absurdity of being expected to pay for a single cracker of caviar. It wasn't just the way Paisley had acted, like splitting the bill separately was some kind of personal betrayal. It was the fact that she was still upset, even after I handed her $50. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. At first, I thought it was just about money. Some people panic when the bill comes, even when they've been spending freely all night. But this felt different. This wasn't just panic or frustration. This was personal. And I couldn't figure out why, until I decided to talk to Daniela. Daniela had been at both birthday dinners, last year and this year. If anyone would have insight, it was her. When I brought it up, she barely reacted, just shrugged and said, "You know, it wasn't just about the bill, right?" The way she said it, like it was something obvious, made my stomach twist. I frowned, trying to process what she meant. "What do you mean?" I asked, but Daniela didn't answer right away. She hesitated, her expression unreadable, like she was debating whether or not to even say it. And then, finally, she sighed and told me. Paisley was still mad about last year. She hadn't let it go. I felt like the ground shifted under me. Last year? I wasn't even there. I had nothing to do with whatever happened that night. But as Daniela kept talking, the pieces started falling into place, and the more I learned, the more stunned I became. Apparently, last year's dinner had its own drama that, until now, I hadn't fully understood. My boyfriend had been put in an incredibly awkward position when he realized that not only was the bill being split evenly, but the tip was also being split equally across everyone. It might have been fine if everyone had been ordering similar things, but that wasn't the case at all. Some people were going all out, ordering the most expensive dishes, rounds of cocktails, extravagant appetizers. And then, at some point, someone took it to the next level and ordered a $300 bottle of champagne, without asking anyone first, under the assumption that everyone would just split the cost. My boyfriend, who hadn't even touched the champagne, refused. He made it clear that he wasn't going to pay for something he didn't drink. He covered his share of the bill, tipped accordingly for what he had ordered, and that was it. Simple. Reasonable. But apparently, that moment was like a match to gasoline. The second he spoke up, other people started hesitating. He had broken the illusion. Once he made it clear that he wasn't going to pay extra just to keep the peace, others started following suit. Some of them had only had a small meal, a single drink. They weren't about to subsidize a night of luxury for people who had been ordering without restraint. And when the reality hit, when the people who had assumed they'd get away with spreading their excessive spending across the group suddenly realized they were on their own, it turned into a full-blown problem. And here's where it got even messier. Paisley had been one of the people drinking the champagne. She had been enjoying it freely, assuming that, as always, the cost would just be absorbed by the group. She had not planned to pay for it. But when my boyfriend refused, and others followed, she was suddenly faced with a bill that was much higher than she had expected. And she blamed him for it. She thought he had ruined the atmosphere. That if he had just stayed quiet and gone along with it, no one would have questioned anything, and the night could have ended smoothly. But instead, he had forced people to confront their spending. He had made them think about what they had actually consumed versus what they were being asked to pay for. And for Paisley, that wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a personal insult. I sat there, reeling from what Daniela had just told me. I had spent all this time thinking the issue at this year's dinner was just about a separate bill or a bite of caviar, but it had nothing to do with that. Paisley had been waiting for an opportunity to get back at my boyfriend. And since he wasn't the one she could go after this time, she had turned her frustration onto me. It wasn't about etiquette. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't even really about money. It was about revenge. That's why she had made such a big deal about the separate bill. That's why she had latched onto the ridiculous caviar excuse. That's why, even after I gave her $50, an amount that was probably 10 times what that single bite of caviar was worth, she still wasn't satisfied. She didn't actually want compensation. She wanted me to feel guilty, to feel like I had done something wrong. She wanted me to be uncomfortable, to be punished. It all made sense now. She had been carrying this resentment for a year, waiting for the right moment to make someone pay for it. And this year, I had just been the most convenient target. So it wasn't just about the bill. She was just looking for an excuse to make me feel guilty. Update 2. I tried to move on from the whole thing. I really did. I told myself it wasn't worth the frustration, that Paisley's tantrum over a single bite of caviar wasn't my problem, that I had done nothing wrong. I went through every logical step in my head. We had paid our bill fairly, we hadn't left anyone hanging, and I had even given her money for the ridiculous caviar incident just to smooth things over. There was no reason for me to feel guilty. And yet, no matter how much I tried to push it aside, the situation kept gnawing at me. It felt like an itch just beneath my skin, something I couldn't quite reach, something I couldn't scratch away. It wasn't just the confrontation at the restaurant. It was the way she had insisted on making me feel guilty, the way she had refused to let it go even after I handed her a $50 bill for something that wasn't even remotely my responsibility. It wasn't about the money, at least, not in the way she made it seem. There was something else, something deeper. Her anger had been too sharp, too calculated. The way she framed it, twisting the situation so that I somehow owed her something, the way she latched onto that tiny detail as though it was some massive injustice, it all felt too intentional. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. That something was lurking just beneath the surface, something I hadn't yet put together. I kept replaying the night in my head, the way she had looked at me when she demanded the money, the way she had acted so self-righteous about the separate bill. It was like she was looking for any reason to make me feel bad, to make me question myself. But why? Why go to such lengths over something so minor? So I decided to talk to someone else who had been at the dinner, someone who wasn't directly involved but had been there, watching everything unfold. I needed an outside perspective, someone who could confirm that I wasn't overthinking things. Maybe they would tell me that I was making a big deal out of nothing, that Paisley had just been in a bad mood, that it was all just some petty misunderstanding. I casually asked if everyone had finally settled their part of the bill, if the whole situation had been resolved. I wasn't expecting much of an answer, just a simple yes or no, some reassurance that it had all blown over. Instead, my acquaintance gave me a look. Not just any look, but the kind that said, "Oh, you don't know yet?" The kind that sent a rush of unease through my stomach before a single word was spoken. She made a face, half amusement, half exasperation, and said, "You know that Paisley didn't pay at all." I felt like I had misheard. The words didn't make sense. Paisley didn't pay at all. That wasn't possible. I blinked, confused, waiting for some kind of clarification. Maybe she meant Paisley had forgotten, or she had paid later, or something. But when no clarification came, when my acquaintance just stared at me with that knowing expression, I pressed for an explanation. And what I heard next made everything click into place in a way that made my stomach churn. Paisley had managed to get through yet another expensive birthday dinner without paying a single cent. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't just an unfortunate accident, a misunderstanding, or a moment of bad etiquette. This was a pattern. She had done the exact same thing last year, and she had done it again this year, right in front of everyone, with no shame, no hesitation, no second thoughts. Last year, when her friend was stuck with an $800 shortfall because not everyone had sent their share, Paisley had been right there, at the table, watching the whole thing unfold. She had listened to the growing frustration, had seen the person who had covered the full amount stress over how they were going to get reimbursed. And she hadn't done a damn thing. She hadn't thrown in her own share. She hadn't even made the smallest attempt to help fix the situation. She had just sat there, watching as the others scrambled to figure out where the missing money was coming from. She had acted sympathetic. She had nodded along as people complained about how unfair it was. She had agreed that it was terrible that people weren't paying properly. But she had never once reached for her phone. She had never once offered to help cover the gap. She hadn't even pretended to be concerned about it. And the worst part? No one had called her out. And now, this year, she had done the exact same thing. While everyone else at the table was pulling out their phones, calculating their shares, trying to work out who owed what, Paisley had sat there, perfectly still, perfectly calm. She hadn't reached for her wallet. She hadn't tapped her phone. She hadn't even acted like she was about to pay. She had just let the conversation swirl around her, let the numbers get thrown around, let the confusion mount as people tried to figure out why the final amount wasn't adding up. People started murmuring, double-checking their calculations, looking around the table to see who hadn't sent their payment yet. And that was when Paisley had sighed dramatically, lifted her chin just enough to sound put upon, and said, "Well, I splurged on caviar, I treated everyone." That was her way out. She had used that single moment, her brief, completely voluntary decision to offer me one cracker with caviar on it, as an excuse to opt out of paying for her own meal. She had framed it as though she had already contributed, as though her generosity had balanced out whatever she supposedly owed. And somehow, unbelievably, it had worked. The confusion over the missing money, the awkwardness of trying to directly accuse someone in the middle of an already tense situation, the discomfort of calling someone out for not paying, it had all worked in her favor. No one wanted to be the person to say, "Wait a second, treating people to a small bite of something doesn't mean you're exempt from paying for your own meal." No one wanted to be the one to confront her directly. So they let it slide. Again. And this was why she had latched onto me that night. This was why she had made such an overblown spectacle about the separate bill. This was why she had fixated on the caviar, why she had gone out of her way to demand I pay for it even after I had already given her $50. It wasn't about etiquette. It wasn't about feeling insulted. It wasn't even really about the money. It was a distraction. A way to create just enough drama, just enough noise, just enough of a scene that no one would turn their attention toward her. Because while everyone was looking at me, she was slipping away unnoticed. And this is why she blew this situation up so much. This was a way to create a buzz so that no one would notice her real intention, to eat at someone else's expense again. Update 3. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to contact Paisley anymore. It was clear who she was and how she operated, and I had no interest in getting tangled up in her games again. I wasn't going to argue with her, wasn't going to chase down an apology, wasn't even going to bother explaining myself. People like her thrived on manipulation, on twisting reality until they came out looking like the victim. There was no point in engaging. I was done. For a few days, I felt a sense of relief, like I had successfully closed that chapter. But then, out of nowhere, Daniela messaged me. The moment I saw her name pop up, I knew something had happened. The way she phrased it, the urgency of it, "Did you hear what happened?" made my stomach drop. And then she told me. It turned out that someone had finally had enough. One of the girls from the dinner, someone who had clearly been keeping quiet for too long, decided that she wasn't going to let Paisley get away with it anymore. And instead of whispering behind her back or grumbling about it in private, she went straight for the truth, right out in the open, where everyone could see. In the group chat that included most of the dinner guests, she called Paisley out directly. No beating around the bush, no vague comments, no passive-aggressive hints, just a straight-up question in front of everyone. "Paisley, how much did you pay that night?" Paisley, who was always so quick with an excuse, always so effortlessly charming, tried to redirect the conversation. She did what she always did, acted like the question wasn't serious, tried to shift the topic, made a joke, anything to avoid giving a real answer. But this time, it didn't work. People kept pressing. Others joined in. One person after another started asking the same thing, and as the pressure mounted, the truth finally came out. The number was exactly what I already knew it to be. 0. Paisley had paid nothing. Not a single cent. And the moment that was said out loud, it was like a floodgate had opened. People started talking, really talking. They started going back over every expensive dinner, every group outing, every moment that had once seemed like an oversight but now looked like a pattern. Someone brought up last year's dinner, when her friend had been left scrambling to cover the missing $800. Someone else remembered another dinner before that, where she had miraculously never pulled out her wallet but still enjoyed all the appetizers and drinks that were ordered for the table. More stories started pouring in, pieces of the puzzle coming together. It turned out this wasn't just a once-a-year thing. It wasn't even just a big group dinner thing. Paisley had been doing this for years. Someone mentioned how she had invited them out to lunch once, only to suddenly realize she had forgotten her wallet at home. Another person recalled a time she had claimed her card wasn't working and promised to pay them back later, except she never did. More and more people started sharing their experiences, connecting the dots. Every time, it had been the same story. Somehow, in some way, she always found an excuse. Sometimes it was a dramatic story about how her bank had locked her account for suspicious activity. Other times, she claimed she had already Venmo'd someone and that they must have just not seen it yet. When confronted directly, she would act shocked, even offended, and say something vague about getting it sorted before conveniently changing the subject. And the worst part was, before now, no one had really put all of it together. Everyone had assumed that their experience was an isolated incident. That maybe it really had been bad luck, an honest mistake, just one of those things that happens occasionally. But now, with all these stories out in the open, it was impossible to ignore. Paisley had never just been forgetful. She wasn't unlucky, and she wasn't dealing with some financial crisis that she was too embarrassed to talk about. She had been planning this. Every single time. She had made a lifestyle out of subtly getting other people to cover her expenses. She had mastered the art of creating just enough social discomfort that people didn't want to directly accuse her, didn't want to be the ones to make things awkward. But now, it wasn't just whispers or quiet frustrations. It was out in the open, and people were done with it. In the days that followed, her social circle changed almost overnight. People stopped responding to her messages. Plans that once would have included her suddenly didn't. Conversations in group chats moved on without her input. The silent tolerance she had relied on for so long had disappeared, and she was no longer getting away with it. But the funniest part came a few weeks later. Despite everything, despite the fact that she had to know that people were talking, despite the fact that she had lost most of her friends over this, she still tried to pull the same stunt again. She tried to organize another dinner party at a restaurant. She sent out invitations, tried to frame it as a casual, friendly get-together, something fun and relaxed. But everyone already knew how it would end. One by one, people ignored her messages. Some just left her on read. Others replied bluntly, making it clear that they weren't falling for it anymore. Sorry, but I don't want to be in a situation where I have to pay for someone else. The excuses varied, but the meaning was the same. No one was interested. No one was playing her game anymore. She had run out of people to trick. And that was it. The cycle was broken. The charm, the excuses, the little tricks that had kept her afloat for so long, they didn't work anymore. No one was fooled. No one was willing to play along. This time, everyone knew the truth.